I'm Duncan Strauss. This is Talking Animals. Our website is talkinganimals.net, where we make available all sorts of information, as well as archives and podcasts of past Talking Animals programs. We also have a link to the Talking Animals Facebook page. Like us already, will you? And our Twitter page. Please follow us. Plus, there's a place to subscribe to our email newsletter so we can keep you posted on forthcoming guests, program news, and more. That's all found at talkinganimals.net. It's nearly time to speak with today's guest, Brian May. So let me outline a few things about him. As I mentioned earlier, he launched his own animal protection campaign called Save Me, after the Queen song, of course, and has been quite active and quite vocal about a number of animal issues in the UK, including vigorously opposing fox hunting and a proposed cull of badgers currently under consideration. Just 2 weeks ago, he received a prestigious Animal Action Award in recognition of his work on behalf of animals from the International Fund for Animal Welfare. He's also been recognized as a Commander of the Order of the British Empire, CBE, from that other Queen, and holds a PhD in astrophysics. He's also been known to play some guitar now and then. So with a reminder that we invite you to join the conversation by calling 813-239-9663 or emailing dj at wmnf.org. Let's welcome Brian May to Talking Animals. Brian, hello.
Hello, Duncan. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks so much for joining us today on Talking Animals. It's a great pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you. Thank you for that glowing introduction.
Well, it's we could have gone on and on, even if we might have already done so. But there's just a number of issues that you're passionate about that I'd like to delve into, and I hope we will momentarily. But first, maybe we could just talk a little bit about your path into animal advocacy. It feels to me rather recent, but maybe it's more of a long-standing interest, and I just may have not been paying as close attention to that.
It's long-standing, but I haven't been as active as I am now until the last couple of years. I always felt very strongly about animals. I mean, you can tell it in some of the songs. But I always promised myself that if I had the opportunity a little later in life, I would spend some of my life trying to improve the loss of animals and trying to change things so that we treat them with respect. So the time came, basically. I've achieved a lot of my dreams. I've been very lucky in my life, and I just thought it's time to do that. And it started off with hedgehogs. I don't know if you have hedgehogs over there, but little small prickly animals over here.
Sure.
And you have those too?
Well, no, but we love hedgehogs, certainly, yes.
Yeah, well, I became involved in a campaign to try and save them from being eradicated in an island because they were accused of stealing birds' eggs. And we persuaded these people to rehouse them instead and release them on the mainland. And it was a great victory. And I think I was kind of spoilt by it. I thought, okay, I can do this. I can really make a difference out there. So then I got into other issues of wild animals, which really have always been close to my heart, particularly the foxes and particularly the badgers. And, of course, it ain't so easy. It really is not easy because you're up against people who really have a vested interest in keeping things the way they are.
Yeah.
And, it's tough. It's been tough, but I'm in there. I can't really do a U-turn now. It's something I do feel very passionately about, and we are making a difference.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because some of the things, as I sort of prepared to speak with you today, in some of the interviews in print and TV and radio and stuff, at one point or another, you sounded like, hey, I'm going to give this. I've got some time. I might give this a year. But as you kind of alluded to, you seem pretty deep in. I doubt that you're going to reach in the end of any sort of calendar period and say, okay, well, I've taken my best shot. Now I'm going to, move on to another passion.
No, I think I'm in for the duration now. Yeah. It's funny, you get a lot of pressure. A lot of people would like me to give up.
Sure.
They work on you so you get tired and dispirited and depressed. And I have got a little depressed at times, but there's something which drives you on. I think the more you get knocked, the more you realize that this is something that really needs to be fought for.
Yeah. Well, you're clearly getting to people and getting, sort of at some issues and under some skin. Because again, and sort of preparing for some of this, I was really struck by some of the just debates that you had on TV and radio where everybody was at least mildly civil, but some other like blogs and some other things where it's like, holy cow, man, you have really you don't see that kind of vehemence without people really feeling threatened in their positions.
That's right. It took a bit of adjusting to, because I've been a musician all my life, and it's a fairly gentle world. People can say that you're crap. They don't like your music, which can upset you, but that's about the worst they can say. But in this world, I've got a lot of pretty serious abuse. And some of it's very subtle. You know, I mean, they can work on you in mysterious ways and really discredit you. You know,
Yeah.
really on your toes, and you have to be very resilient. I think I've adapted. I'm not, you know, it doesn't affect me as deeply as it used to, but it still affects me. You know, I get up in the morning wondering where the next bullet is going to come from, in a sense, especially if I've just made an announcement. If I've just been on TV or whatever, you know, there's going to be a big backlash every time.
Sure. Well, let's talk a little bit more. For example, in working against fox hunting, I mean, you're obviously working against, you know, deeply ingrained tradition. And,
Yes.
I mean, obviously you recognized that when you began, but did that sort of alter the sort of campaign or strategy that you chose to either participate in or devise, knowing that, you know, you'd be facing kind of a blast furnace of intensity on the other side?
Well, I'm learning all the time. I expected some of it, but I didn't realize the full scope of it. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Tradition is very much what's behind it, and I think tradition can be a very evil thing in a sense. I mean, tradition can be an excuse for all kinds of vile practices, which really ought to be thrown out. And I see it in so many areas, you know. And it's difficult. I feel it in myself even. You know, there's certain. I remember I was brought up on. You know, my dad used to take me down the seafront, and we would eat prawns on the seafront, and that was like one of the most memorable experiences of my youth. It was like a bonding experience with my dad.
Sure.
And it was much later, you know, people were saying to me, well, you're supposed to be a vegetarian, why are you eating prawns? And I took a real good look at myself, and I thought, well, it's ingrained, it's in there. Something is telling me that that's okay, even though these creatures are boiled alive.
Yeah.
And I'm eating them, that's okay. So why am I thinking that's okay? So it's a long road for everybody, and I'm dealing with people who had that bonding experience with their dads, going out and killing a fox and having the blood smeared all over their face. And it's horrific, and I think everybody in their right mind would call that barbaric.
Yeah.
But it's tradition, and tradition is involved in keeping people in those mindsets, and that's what we have to break. We have to make people realize that animals are animals too. You know, we're animals, they're animals, and we all, certainly in the mammal world, feels pretty much the same about things. We all feel pleasure, we all feel pain.
Right.
We all want to rear our children, and you know, to me, the world has gone seriously wrong in the way we treat other creatures on this planet, in farming, in animal experimentation, and in the way that we treat our wild animals.
Well, that's the thing, and you sort of, I think, touched on a couple of really key points that intersect when it's something like fox hunting, for example, because you've got these deeply ingrained traditions and what people grew up doing, but you've also got the thing that you acknowledged about the shrimp example, which is that for a lot of people, as they are made aware of things or have a reason to think about things, they can, if they choose to, travel a continuum. So,
exactly.
You know,
I think it is definitely a continuum. Yeah, people travel along that line, and I haven't got all the way yet.
Yeah.
You know, I'm looking at milk and cheese and stuff now because I know, having been in this for a while now, I know that there's pretty much as much cruelty involved in the production of milk as there is in producing meat. In fact, possibly more so.
Sure.
So now I'm asking myself, okay, why do I want milk in my cornflakes? Why do I think that's so important?
Right.
You know,
Right.
It's a line you travel along.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. I mean, there's some people who I greatly admire who find out some of these things, and tomorrow they're gone completely vegan, and that's great. But I think for a lot of us, it is more about steps and traveling that continuum. And to me, any steps you make in that way is better than what it was yesterday. So
absolutely. It's all a gradual change of consciousness, and I think we need it. It's partly selfish too. You know, we need to do this for our own physical and mental health as well. You know, it is not healthy to be eating animals, especially animals that have been farmed brutally and pumped full of all sorts of hormones and antibiotics and whatever. You know, we're doing ourselves immense amounts of harm by eating meat.
Absolutely.
And it should change, just for our own good, if nothing else.
Yeah, well, just our last guest here on Talking Animals was Dr. Neil Bernard, whose work you may or may not be familiar with, but he, he's written any number of, so he can speak to that from a an MD standpoint and done a lot of research. But let me let people know in the meantime, this is Talking Animals. If you just tuned in, we're speaking with Queen guitarist Brian May. We invite you to join the conversation by calling 813-239-9663 or emailing DJ at WMNF.org. So Brian, I mean, I think a lot of people would, know, whatever their familiarity with Britain, would certainly be aware that fox hunting is an issue, and sometimes it's more or less an issue depending on what who's in office and what kind of legislation is going on. But here's something that I think is less obvious that I found fascinating. My wife came back from Canada several weeks ago with a copy of Maclean's magazine that carried a small but really well-reported and just smartly written article about this proposed badger cull and the issues and viewpoints swirling around. And I just thought it was so interesting, partly because it seems highly specific to Britain in some ways, yet universal in the way that it seemed to pit factions against each other and identifying how to solve a problem, all the sort of wild and domestic animal issues, and of course the economic repercussions. So maybe you wouldn't mind sort of outlining just some of the basics of that for the audience that may not be familiar with that, and then sort of take us up to date, at least at the moment, on what seems a huge controversy.
Yeah, you're right. It is something which is global. I didn't realize that until recently. Yes, it crops up in various forms in various countries. The thing is, I guess it all starts with farming animals. In the beginning, can you still hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
yes.
I had a thing on the line. Yeah, it starts off, as far as I can see, historically, instead of chasing animals around and killing them where you find them and eating them, instead of this, you're farming them. So you're sectioning off parts of the land to actually rear these animals, and then you're in a sense in conflict with the wildlife around. The wildlife is a nuisance, and it's been said over here the only thing that most farmers want to move on their land is a tractor. So there is again we're up against traditional views. People look at the badger, and what has been said is that the badger spreads bovine TB. Now, it's a long discussion, but basically the bovine TB came with the cows. That's what happened. When we started importing cows to rear them, bovine TB came along with them, and the wild badger population got infected, and now they are what's called a vector. They can spread it, but they're not the principal means of spreading it. Really, the cow-to-cow transmission is the main thing. So now we have are you still hearing me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now we have a new government, which is very much farming dominated. And they've all decided to get rid of all the trials of vaccination that were going on under the last government, and they want to kill the badgers, basically.
Yeah.
And all the scientific evidence that's been amassed says that this is not going to work. Not only that it's cruel and immoral and all that stuff, but also that it is no way going to work. And you can prove this quite easily. But nevertheless, the government wants to do it. They've launched a consultation on their website, the DEFRA website. They're called the Department of the Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs. But unfortunately, it's all about farming at the moment with this government that we have.
Yeah.
So we have a hell of a fight on our hands to just say, look at the science, understand what's going on. Even if you don't understand what cruelty is, and immorality, look at the science and realize that this is not going to work. This is our job to make people realize.
Yeah. Well, it certainly seems incredibly complicated, and again, a lot of people that as I again was studying up on this, really, are getting quite upset that you've stepped out. I mean, and I guess it should be said in some way that I'm sure part of why people are upset, I probably would be if I was somehow squaring off against you on an issue like this, is that you're not just another rock and roll guy. I mean, you have a PhD. You can't just be easily dismissed as like, oh, what does he know? I mean, because you're steeped in science and research. So,
That's what I can bring to it. Yeah, I mean, I get accused of being an ignorant townie. You don't understand. You don't live in the country. Well, in fact, I do live in the country about half the time. I have a foot in both camps and things. But yes, what I can bring to it is that I do understand the science. I can read a scientific paper and find the flaws in it. And that kind of gets under people's skin, as you say. They go, what's he doing here? Well,
sure.
I'm here because I care. I have no other agenda except that I don't want animals to be abused. That's the only thing I'm here for.